Getting paid feels amazing for about 12 minutes. Your paycheck hits, your bank balance finally looks healthy, and for one brief moment you think, okay, I'm good. Then rent shows up. Credit card payment, car payment, insurance, groceries, gas, and 5 days after getting paid, you're already thinking about the next paycheck. If that cycle feels familiar, the problem may not be that you're terrible with money. You may just be trying to escape paycheck to paycheck the wrong way. There are three numbers that can show you exactly where you're stuck: your floor, your gap, and your buffer. And the first mistake is surprisingly simple: looking at your checking balance and treating that number like money you actually have available. Say you open your bank app after payday and see $1,840. That looks pretty decent, except $1,100 of it is going to rent. $220 is going to car insurance. $180 is your credit card minimum, and you still need groceries and gas before the next paycheck. Suddenly, that $1,840 is not really $1,840. Most of it already has a job. That's the first shift I want you to make. Your checking balance is not your financial breathing room. Instead of asking, how much money do I have? Ask, how much of this money is already spoken for? Those sound like almost the same question, but they create completely different decisions. A $2,300 balance can make you feel temporarily rich, while $1,700 of it is basically standing in line waiting to leave your account. So the first number you need is what I'm going to call your floor. Nothing fancy. Your floor is simply what a normal month costs before optional spending really starts. Rent, basic groceries, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments, transportation, your phone, and the other things your normal life actually requires. Not your dream budget, not the absolute cheapest month you could survive while eating rice in the dark. Just a realistic minimum normal month. Say you take home $4,000 a month and your basic required life costs around $3,450. That means your floor is $3,450. You do not need a 47-tab spreadsheet to figure this out. Look at the last month or two of transactions, get reasonably close, and move on. We're trying to diagnose the problem, not qualify for the spreadsheet Olympics. And if money explained through your actual paycheck and bills is more useful to you than financial jargon, that's exactly what Leon Knows Money is about. Now we get to the second number, and this is where things become useful. Take that $4,000 of monthly take-home pay and subtract the $3,450 floor. You have $550 left. That $550 is your gap, and your gap tells you something your checking balance never could: what kind of paycheck-to-paycheck problem you actually have. Imagine two people who both take home $4,000 a month. Person A has a floor of $3,300, which leaves about $700. Person B has a floor of $3,950, which leaves $50. Same paycheck. Totally different problem. If you give both of them the same advice to budget better, you're basically handing the same prescription to two people with different illnesses. Person A has breathing room on paper, but somehow that breathing room keeps disappearing. Maybe there's an extra grocery run, some takeout, a random Amazon order, an Uber because the day was a disaster, and then an annual subscription shows up that they completely forgot existed. None of those purchases individually needs to be some massive financial crime. The problem is that every dollar in the gap is sitting there competing with normal life. Say you have $350 of potential breathing room after a paycheck. If your strategy is, whatever is left right before the next paycheck, I'll save, you've created a competition where savings gets the last pick. Instead, protect a realistic piece of that gap before everything else gets a vote. Maybe that's $75, maybe it's $100, not the entire $350. The goal is not to create such an aggressive transfer that 6 days later, you're moving the money back or putting groceries on a credit card. If $100 works, though, now something changes. One paycheck becomes $100 protected, then $200, then $300. After 5 paychecks, that's $500 between you and zero. No heroic 30-day no-spend challenge. No solemn vow that DoorDash will never again enter your home. You simply stopped asking savings to survive whatever happened to be left over. But what if you calculate your gap and there basically isn't one? This is where a lot of financial advice gets really annoying. You stop getting takeout, you cut a subscription, you stop buying coffee out, you manage to squeeze out 90 bucks, which is great, except your $1,650 rent, $540 car payment, $240 insurance bill, and $300 of minimum debt payments are still sitting there like cute. If your floor is almost as high as your income, the problem is not that you failed to optimize 17 tiny purchases. Your monthly structure is squeezing you. And that means the more useful move is usually to investigate one recurring line that could make a noticeable difference every single month. Maybe you shop your auto insurance. Maybe you look at what that car actually costs once the payment, insurance, and gas are combined. Maybe an expensive phone financing plan is about to end. Maybe high cost debt is absorbing all of your breathing room. Maybe housing needs to change when your lease is up. Maybe your income has been flat long enough that checking what your job pays elsewhere is more important than finding another $8 expense to cut. You do not need to do all of those things. That would just replace financial stress with a new full-time job called optimizing my entire existence. You're looking for one meaningful recurring lever. Saving $8 once gives you $8 once. Improving your monthly cash flow by $80 means next month starts $80 easier too. Recurring problems respond best to recurring improvements. So now you either had a gap and started protecting part of it, or you found a way to create more of one. That's progress, but it still doesn't mean you've escaped paycheck to paycheck, because you can create an extra $200 this month, feel like things are finally turning around, and then your tire decides it has other plans for your personal growth. $240 later, you're back on the credit card. That's why the third number matters: your buffer. A gap gives you the ability to make progress. A buffer is what keeps normal life from deleting that progress every time something inconvenient happens. Imagine two people with the same paycheck who both get hit with a $280 car repair. One has $60 available, so the rest goes on a credit card. The other has a $650 cash buffer, pays the repair, gets appropriately annoyed, and moves on without creating a new debt problem. That is what the buffer is for. It is not there so you can open your banking app and admire your enormous empire of $650. It's there because ordinary problems stop becoming financial emergencies. And if you currently have almost nothing saved, you do not need to stare at some giant goal like 6 months of expenses and feel like you're standing at the bottom of Mount Everest in flip-flops. Start with a milestone that would actually change your life. Maybe $250 covers a smaller surprise. Maybe $500 gets you through a minor car problem or an awkward stretch between bills and payday. Maybe $1,000 creates enough room that one bad week no longer immediately becomes credit card debt. Eventually, maybe you build enough breathing room to operate roughly one pay cycle ahead. These are not magic numbers. They're markers showing that payday has less control over you than it did before. And this is the part that changes how I think about escaping paycheck to paycheck. At the beginning, payday is rescue. Friday comes and you immediately start paying things because your account was almost empty. As your buffer grows, bills can be paid with money that is already there. Then Friday comes, the paycheck lands, and nothing dramatic happens. It just replenishes the system. That may not sound as exciting as becoming a millionaire by age 27 while living in a glass house in Miami, but financially, it's a huge change. Payday should eventually feel like income, not rescue. The calendar stops controlling every decision. You can absorb a small surprise. You can enter payday with money still sitting there. And once you have more breathing room, your gap can start doing bigger jobs, paying down debt faster, building a stronger emergency fund, investing, or giving you options when your job starts making you question every life decision that led you there. There's one more thing that can speed this up without making your current life miserable. When something improves your cash flow, decide what part of that improvement will do before your spending quietly claims all of it. Maybe you get a $200 monthly raise. You do not have to pretend you never got the raise and save every dollar. Maybe $100 makes your life better right now, and the other $100 increases your gap. Same with a bonus, a tax refund, a BNPL payment finally disappearing, a phone being paid off, or an insurance bill dropping. saving. Give part of that new money a job before it develops plans of its own. So the whole escape map is really just three numbers. Your floor tells you what your life requires. Your gap tells you what room exists or what needs to change. Your buffer tells you how much distance you've created between yourself and needing the next paycheck, and that distance is what eventually creates options. So don't leave this video thinking, I need to be better with money. Do something much more useful. Open your recent transactions and estimate your monthly floor, subtract it from your take-home pay, then ask yourself one question. Do I have a gap that keeps disappearing, or is my floor so high that there's barely a gap to begin with? If the gap exists, protect a realistic piece of it. If it doesn't, investigate one recurring expense or income line big enough to actually move the number. The goal isn't to make your paycheck last longer. It's to need the next paycheck less, because you haven't really escaped paycheck to paycheck when you've just gotten better at surviving until Friday. You escape when Friday stops feeling like rescue. And if you want to keep making money feel less chaotic and build more control, stability, and options with a normal paycheck, that's what this channel is here for.